If you steer the Tideway from Mortlake to Putney well, you can reduce your race time by many precious seconds. This video will help you do this.
This is the map of the River Thames between Chiswick Bridge here and Putney Bridge here. This section of the river is used for all of the major head of the river races, the Eights Head, Fours Head, Hares and Scullers Heads. They're all rowed on the ebb tide, with the river flowing downstream from Chiswick to Putney. The only major exception, of course, is the Oxford University boat race, which is rowed on the flood tide in the reverse direction. To steer this particular section of the river perfectly requires an enormous amount of experience, skill, training and constructive coaching. Very few people have the opportunity to put all of those elements together, so this video has been produced to try to help everyone to do the best they possibly can on what may well be an unfamiliar stretch of water. What we suggest that you do is get yourself lined up well above Chiswick Bridge so that you are prepared to come downstream in the very centre of the river from about 100 yards above the bridge opposite the Quintin Boat Club, and you steer directly under the very centre of Chiswick Bridge, going under the central arch and crossing the start line for the head of the river courses about 100 metres below the bridge. The line is marked by a post on this, the Middlesex bank. Try to steer in the very centre of the river, gradually and gently all the way around this bend, keeping in the centre until you come towards Barnes Bridge, which is a railway bridge. When you first start to see the bridge ahead of you, get yourself into the correct position so that again you can come straight under the very centre of the bridge without having to make any last minute steering adjustments. You should aim to come out from under the bridge very slightly to the left of centre, in other words a little bit closer to this, the Middlesex shore, and further away from the Surrey shore. You're now coming onto the first straight section of the river, coming past the bandstand here and coming down towards what used to be known as the Lep Bend, but the Lep warehouse here has now been demolished, so it is more conventional to refer to this particular area as Chiswick Steps. There are some steps here on this bank which are a timing point in the Oxford-Cambridge University boat race. Coming along this straight, keep slightly to the left of centre, so you remain about 1/3 of the way from the Middlesex bank, and at the end of the straight you will see a line of moored boats which you should keep on your left, on stroke side, aiming to pass beside those boats about 1 or 1.5 widths away from them. If we're talking about an 1/8 width as being 20 feet, then you want to be no more than 30 feet away from these boats. Pass down parallel to the line until you come to the penultimate boat. Don't get drawn over to the last boat, which will take you too far to your left. As you come opposite the penultimate one, you want to then start steering more towards the centre of the river so that you're lining yourself up to go alongside Chiswick 8, which is an island, passing about 1/3 of the way between this bank of Chiswick 8 and the Surrey bank here. If you were to look at the overall map of the river, you would find that that position would put you right in the centre, ignoring Chiswick Island, Chiswick 8. However, you want to look at the bank of Chiswick 8, make sure you are 1/3 of the way from that bank. As you're coming along this straight here, you should just be able to see a church spire in the distance, and you should be aiming more or less straight for that spire, as we'll show you on the video a bit later on. Coming away from Chiswick 8, you will then notice that you are back in the very centre of the river as you gradually and gently steer around this bend, coming round to bowside. You pass Hammersmith Pier on your left, and again you should be about 1/3 of the way from Hammersmith Pier, the same distance that you were from Chiswick 8. But again, this position puts you in the centre of the river. As you come past Hammersmith Pier, you can start lining yourself up to steer under Hammersmith Bridge, and here you want to look for the lampposts in the centre of the bridge. There are 2 lampposts to either side of the centre, and you should aim to steer directly underneath the lamppost second away from the buttress on the inside of the bend. Again, we will show you this on the video a little bit later. Coming out from underneath the bridge, you are now a little bit closer to the right-hand bank, in other words the Surrey bank, than you are to Middlesex. You should aim to keep 1/3 of the way from the Surrey bank as you come onto the straight past the large Harrods Repository, which is another very large and well recognised landmark. Keep yourself the same distance from the right-hand bank, 1/3 of the way out from it, as you come down this straight and past the milepost, which is a little obelisk 1 mile from the finish of the course. After you've passed the milepost, you can then start steering very gently over towards Strokeside, so that you're starting to come round past Barn Elms and on your left Fulham Football Club to get onto the final straight down the Putney embankment. It is important on this bend that you continue to keep a little bit closer to the Surrey bank than to the Middlesex bank, otherwise it is very easy to accidentally put yourself over very shallow dead water outside Fulham Football Club, commonly known as the Fulham Flats. There's no stream here at all, and many crews will cut this corner, take a shorter distance, but will actually go slower as a result of coming out of the stream. So don't make that mistake. Keep yourself out wide of the centre, about 1/3 of the way from the Surrey bank as you come past Barn Elms, and then starting to look ahead to the Black Buoy, which is a large mooring buoy which usually has a boat attached to it, and is the first of a line of moored boats all the way along the Putney embankment. You should steer so that you pass the Black Buoy only about 1 or 1.5 boat widths to your bow side. If you're any further away from it, you will again be over too far to your stroke side and over what's left of the Fulham Flats. So keep quite close to the Black Buoy and keep the same distance away from all of these other moored boats, in other words about 1 or 1.5 widths away from them, until you come about halfway along the embankment opposite London Rowing Club, which is the last of the large rowing clubs there. From there to the finish, which is no more than a couple of 100 metres, you very gently steer away from the line of moored boats, aiming from now until right up to the centre of Putney Bridge. This line will take you back into the centre of the river, and you cross the finish line opposite Putney Pier, which is about 75 metres before you reach the bridge.
We'll go back up to the start now and show you what the river looks like from a rubber launch. We'll look at the first section from Chiswick Bridge to Barnes Bridge. Here we are approaching Chiswick Bridge. In fact, we're just a little bit too far to the right. We really should be a couple of feet further over to the left so that the centre of the bridge is directly above the white building in the background. We're now coming down towards Chiswick Bridge. You can see the edge of the brewery straight in front, and at the very worst you want to make sure that the left-hand edge of the large building is directly under the centre of the bridge. We're coming towards the start line, which is marked by a large post on the left, just below Tideway Sculler's boathouse. Still aiming towards the brewery. There is the post which marks the start line. You can see that we're virtually in the centre of the river. We're now passing the brewery, keeping the same distance away from both banks and steering very gently around to stroke side. This is the sort of view that you would get if you were coxing a front loader. Obviously in an 8 you're only going to get peripheral vision because the crew is going to be straight in front of you. We've now been on the course for just over a minute, about a minute and a half, and we're starting to come round to Barnes Bridge, which is the railway bridge in front. As you can see, the bows are still aiming to the right of the bridge because we haven't yet reached the apex of the bend. So we're still gently steering round to the left as we come towards the bridge, so that we pass directly under the centre of it. This pub on the right is the White Hart. There's a flag post on the top where there is often a flag flying, which is a useful indicator of the wind, which gives you an idea of what the conditions will be like further down the course. Now just making the final approach to Barnes Bridge, almost in line to steer straight underneath the middle where you can see the lights. As we come underneath the bridge, you're now aiming for the tall trees right in the centre of the picture on the far bank. This is the next section that we're looking at from Barnes Bridge up to Chiswick 8. Just finished making that first bend, and we're now steering a tiny bit to the left of that clump of trees that we were looking at as we came under the bridge. On this straight, we're now very definitely further to the left of the river than central, coming past the bandstand on the left bank, which is about 1 minute below the bridge if you're in an 8. This is Corney Reach that we're on, coming down towards what was the Lep Bend. On the left you can see the line of moored boats. Make sure that you pass parallel to this line, about 1.5 widths away from them, so that you're effectively in the middle of the river as you come round this bend. Straight in front now you can see a couple of barges at the end of the bend of boats. Very gently steering away from those barges to straighten up along the straight section of river past Chiswick 8, which is the island you can see virtually straight in front. It's quite hard to determine on the video, but it's the dark line straight in front, slightly to the left of the tower block, which we're now aiming for. There's the tower block. We're now aiming a little bit to the right of that for that church spire. As we're coming past Chiswick 8, you can see that we're slightly further towards the island than we are to the right-hand bank. We're now in a position below the bottom of Chiswick 8, and again you should be in the centre of the river as you start to very gently steer round to bow side, starting to come around the bend towards Hammersmith Bridge. Directly in front in the distance you can see 2 or 3 barges moored to Hammersmith Pier. You should aim to pass Hammersmith Pier a little bit closer to the pier than to your right hand bank, about the same distance away from the pier as you were from Chiswick 8. As you come towards Hammersmith Pier, note that the bows are still pointing to the left of Hammersmith Bridge, because you still haven't quite reached the apex of the bend and not yet really begun turning round to your right. You can just make out the second lamppost in the centre of the picture there. Those are the lampposts that you have to steer towards, but don't start cutting that corner. Make sure that you stay out in the centre of the river as you approach Hammersmith Bridge. Now coming under the bridge, keep an eye on the lampposts. We're going directly underneath them. And now start looking in front of you again as we come down this stretch from Hammersmith Bridge to the milepost. We've continued sweeping around a little bit further to bow side, so the bows have swung round, so we're now pointing almost directly at another large tower block as we come towards Harrods Repository on the right. You can clearly see that we are much closer to the right hand bank than to the left. We should be 1/3 of the way from the right hand bank. As we finish the approach to Harrods, you can see that the bows are now pointing at Fulham Football Ground. There's the repository on the right. Check that you are 1/3 of the way from the right hand bank, twice as far from the left hand bank. As you come away from Harrods, you're now pointing directly down the straight. If you had very keen eyesight or a good pair of binoculars, you could see that you're pointing straight at Barn Elms Rowing Club at the apex of the next bend opposite Fulham Football Club. Going down this straight, maintain your distance of 1/3 of the way out from your right hand bank. In the distance there is Barn Elms Rowing Club. We're now coming to the end of the straight, coming towards the milepost, which we will pass on your right. Make sure here that you keep to the right of the centre of the river. There's a couple of white marker boards on the bank just by the milepost. Often those white markers are more easy to spot than the milepost itself. We're now coming on to the last section of the river from the milepost to the finish. There's Fulham Flats, section of very flat, dead, still water underneath Fulham Football Club. Make sure that you are quite close to the right hand bank, not cutting this bend over those Fulham Flats. Just steering gradually and gently to your left as you start to come around this bend. As you approach Barn Elms on your right, the bows are now pointing into the middle of that clump of trees between Barn Elms and the Putney embankment. In the distance you can just begin to make out the black buoy with a boat moored to it. And beyond the black buoy and slightly to the left of it on the skyline, there's a large tower block which you should make sure that you keep to the left of the black buoy. If that tower block comes above or to the right of the black buoy, it means that you are too far to the right of the river. We're in a perfect position here, coming past Barn Elms, with the tower block just to the left of the black buoy. We're aiming directly for the tower block, so we're going to pass the black buoy about 1 or 1.5 widths away on our bow side. This is Beverley Brook, which is the beginning of the Putney embankment, and there's the Fulham Wall on the left. Note that we're still a little bit closer to the right-hand bank than to the left. Coming past the black buoy in a good position, aiming straight at the tower block, with about 2 minutes of the race to go if you're in a fast 8. We're now passing along the line of moored boats past the Putney embankment. There's the first of the boat clubs, Imperial Boat Club. We're keeping the same distance away from all of these moored boats until we get up to London Rowing Club, which is the last of the large rowing clubs on the embankment that you pass. That's it there with the tall flagpole. So we now very gently steer away from the line of moored boats, gradually swinging the bows across from the right-hand end of Putney Bridge until we're aiming for the very centre of Putney Bridge, with about 100 yards to go to Putney Pier on the right. Through the arches of Putney Road Bridge you can now see one of the buttresses of the Putney Rail Bridge, and ideally you should keep that exactly where it is now, in the centre of the central arch. There's Putney Pier, and the bows are just coming across the finish line now. Keep steering straight. This is what it looks like for a crew. Some club crews in practice, training on the Tideway with the ebb tide coming down past the black buoy. The crew closest to the camera is in an ideal position here. The two crews in front of it are not quite in the right position. The crew on the left is too close to the Middlesex bank. The crew on the right in front is also too close to Middlesex. The cox is using the stream to push the other crew even further out of the stream and to put them at a more disadvantageous position. The cox at the back is now just beginning to make a mistake because he is not straightening up to go through the centre of the bridge early enough. He's just starting to swing round now, but should have done so about 50 yards earlier. The crews have now just crossed the finish line, and as you can see, they're pretty exhausted.
You've now seen the course as it could be steered if you start number 1 on a calm day, but for most coxswains the problems of steering this course are more complex. Here you see the start of the 8's head. The melee of crews at the start can be very demanding of the coxswain. Make sure the coxswain knows the marshalling instructions and start procedure off by heart before he gets into the boat on race day. Follow the umpire's instructions or you may receive penalty points.
More of a time trial, but there's bound to be some overtaking and they're under their way. Now the first crew, and they go in the order in which they finished last year. So the holders, the Amateur Rowing Association's national squad, first crew, won last year, and they're leading the way in this procession from Mortlake to Putney, followed by the second crew of the national squad, and in third place is the Italian crew, Campania region.
Here you get an overhead view of the first part of the course. The crews are now just passing the brewery. They're a little bit to the left of centre, largely because this race is being rowed very close to the top of the tide, and the band of fast water is a little bit wider at that time, and the crews can afford to come just a fraction closer to the Middlesex shore than they would if the tide had dropped a little more. But as they go away, you will see they're now beginning to ease out a little bit into the centre, easing a little bit more over to Surrey, so they're right in the centre as they come down towards Barnes Bridge.
The people who are going to row later going in the other direction, a most amazing spectacle. And remember, 420 crews in the end will take part in this event. The record time recorded in 82 by the national squad, 17 minutes 10.42 seconds. And Chris Bailey thinks it might be quite fast this year.
Yes, this wind we've got today, which is a northwesterly, which has dropped substantially since the morning, will actually help them just the same way as it hindered the boat race crews which rowed in the opposite direction. Since the boat race this morning, the tide has turned, and these crews are now racing on a fast ebb tide, and they've got the assistance of the wind behind. So, providing there's a sufficient pressure up at the front of the race, with the number 2 and 3 pressing on number 1, we should get a really good race for the winner of this event. And this is the first crew, the national squad crew.
This view is taken of the crews as they come towards Barnes Bridge. There's a line of police boats moored on the Surrey shore, and you'll see they come round the bend and quite close to those police boats, still basically in the centre of the stream. On the far side you will now see Thames Tradesman boathouse, and the crews come through Barnes Bridge. First crew just a little bit to the left of centre there, but just going out now. This number 2 crew almost under the actual centre of the bridge. And the crews are now moving down Corney Reach, that is the reach between Barnes Bridge and the corner by Chiswick Steps. And you'll see they've already turned a little bit to keep slightly closer to the Middlesex shore. That's because on the Surrey shore, down on the bottom left-hand corner, the water is very shallow there and runs very slow, and you must keep off those flats there. But now you see the position just a little bit to the left of centre as they go down past the bandstand and straight down Corney Reach. You see the dilemma the coxswain has, where the number 1 crew takes the very best line, and he has to decide whether to follow, hitting the wash of the crew in front, or to try to make a new line and lose a little bit on the steering. Now you see the whole of the big bend opening up, goes round to the right as it passes, and past Chiswick Steps and on to Chiswick 8. And the crews you see, you can also see the line of boats there, and the crews are now beginning to make the turn towards those line of boats.
Country running season. In the summer, of course, crews race over much shorter distances, usually around 6 minutes, but they do their endurance training over this sort of distance in the winter, and this is the sort of final race. Of course, the further these crews row, short of the advantage, oddly enough, of the heavyweights. The heavyweights' advantage tends to be magnified over the 2,000 metre course, and I would expect to see the lightweights proportionally doing very well here, but still within striking distance, but have fallen back from their starting position, because as you may remember, they were almost overlapping the second crew when they started.
In Corny Reach
Here we have the leaders, the right of the picture, national squad, followed by Nottingham, national squad, and the Italians.
And in fact, there's another national squad 8 coming up in 4th place, isn't there?
There are in fact 3 of them, but only 2 rowing in the...
Now you see the start of Chiswick 8, the crews having passed the boats, now going along the stretch between Chiswick 8 and the Surrey shore, and you'll see that they are roughly midway between the bank and the island at this point. Now they're coming round past St Paul's School, and you will see Chiswick Hammersmith Pier on the right and Hammersmith Bridge just in the foreground of the picture. You can see the line they're now taking round that bend. Here's the first crew through Hammersmith Bridge and moving past Harrods with the whole of the Putney Reach before it, moving a little bit over towards Harrods in order to avoid the shallow water now on the Middlesex shore.
To gain the headship has already failed so far this year.
And for the first time today, the sun has come out in time to greet these oarsmen, these leaders, as they head for home at Putney. They'll soon be coming alongside the Fulham football ground, where the 3rd Division match is in progress against Port Vale.
And the first squad crew is really not making very much impression on the lightweights behind them. There's a tremendous tussle going on here for first place. I would have said, if anything, the second crew has begun to close a little on that first crew.
The crews are now coming down towards Fulham football ground, and you can see that big white stand up in the top right hand corner of the picture. You see they're following the bend round. They're not cutting in on that bend, but holding their line to follow basically the Surrey shore at this stage. They're looking for the black buoy ahead of them, so they know that when they see that ahead of them, they know that they can straighten out and row their course just to the left of that black buoy.
Clear water between them.
And now you'll begin to see the crews moving along the line of boats from the black buoy just on the left of your picture. They pick up the line of boats now all the way along past the Putney embankment till they get to London Rowing Club. Here you see the boats moored on their buoys, and the boats passing about a boat length out, which they will do now right through till they come to London Rowing Club, and then they'll begin to ease out and aim straight for Putney Bridge.
The lightweight group based in Nottingham, national squad again. Most of them only around 11 stone.
And that second crew have left the Italians some way behind them. So here we are now looking down on Putney Bridge, and just above that bridge is the finishing mark, and they're almost there.
A tremendous tussle there. The squad raised their rate up to 38. They're obviously anxious and they want to get out as far as they can.
Now with the first crews running past the finish post, we can now turn our attention to the problems of overtaking crews.
From the back, now they're going to have some slower crews to overtake, and weaving in and out of the stream can impede you a little bit, particularly if the crews in front don't get out of the way as quick as they're meant to. The idea is that the crews who are overtaking have right of way, and any crew in front of them should give way, but of course it doesn't always work that way. Here we have the crew 4, who are the second lightweight national team, but they're being closed up by Fiat, who are the second Italian crew here today. They're coxed by an English girl, Pauline Wright, who coxed the English 8 in the last Olympics. And this is, I think, on their side, a very wise choice, because the Italian coxes don't know the river, and we saw this morning in the boat race how terribly important it is to know where to go. And although there may be slight language difficulties, she'll certainly steer them well. And here they are, trying to overtake a crew in what is a very difficult point in the race.
And there you get a good aerial shot of the battle that's going on there between crews 4 and 5, the national squad, number 3 crew, and the Fiat Aviazione crew from Italy. The Italians are pulling level.
Overtaking Tideway Sculler's second crew, nearest you in the picture, red and gold blades. London University making rather hard work of it. They're a big crew, and in this tailwind they may not find it too easy. And inside them again, the Hampton School second 8. Good tussle there. You see the sort of problems you face in this long distance race. The middle crew there is really the meat in the sandwich.
37? No.
That's an astonishing picture.
39? No. 38?
Hampton School,
No.
building up towards the finish. We'll be looking for another good row to see them on their way to their trip to Hong Kong. And they've come up on 14 and overtaken them. Number 14 are London's first crew, pressed up on Hampton. You see how close these crews are getting. They all want to hold the middle line, which is where the strong tide is. So there's a tremendous tussle going along here. 13 trying to hold off 14. Hampton School, there's schoolboys fighting off the older men from London Rowing Club, including several Oxford and Cambridge Blues there in the London crew in the middle.
We've watched the Tideway so far under ideal conditions, but the river can get very rough, and this may mean you must seek calm water rather than the optimum course in mid-river. Watch the start of this 1987 boat race.
So this was the move off the stake boats, Oxford on this side, on the Middlesex side, making immediately for the shelter of the Fulham Wall. And this was a tactic that paid off. And Cambridge, in fact, Chris, were a little slow to respond to that, weren't they?
Yes, I think here Cambridge weren't really in control of what they were doing. They decided to follow Oxford, but too late. Really, you either have to make a decision and go over, or you set off down the middle station and hold it. At this point, Cambridge was still holding their normal station, and Oxford had actually made the protection of the wall, so at that stage they were going to start to get flat water. And it was shortly after that Cambridge moved over, and here come Cambridge moving over to join them, but by this time, of course, they actually had to chase them, and that's never a psychologically sensible and strong thing to do. It gave Oxford perhaps a three-quarter length lead in the first minute and a half.
I can't remember seeing a crew so close to the Fulham Wall at the start of a race before.
No, not in recent years at all. Certainly in 1973 we moved over, but not as closely as that. And Oxford went right under the wall, and it paid off. You can see how much water's flying over the Cambridge boat. Look at the waves breaking over the back of the bowman, whereas Oxford are comparatively clear. There's no water breaking over their boat. Still see it. At this point, Cambridge seemed to be on a collision course. They straightened up at this point, and there wasn't actually very much to choose between them, but I suspect that it took a great deal out of Cambridge to keep their boat actually on those terms.
Yes, they must have covered a lot more distance than Oxford in those that opening half mile or so.
Now that's, in physiological terms, that's always the problem, that if you use a great deal of energy in the first part of this course, that you pay a horrendous penalty for it later on. It's a race that has to be very well timed, and I suspect the nervousness of the moment and the need to get back on terms played quite a part in their inability to respond to Oxford's later moves.
Again here, Cambridge converging very closely indeed. Those blades are almost touching.
Well, you know, I think Andy Lodenberg, the Oxford Cox, did extremely well. He kept Oxford out in the water which they could manage and pushed Cambridge out into water which was that much rougher, and it made it so much harder for Cambridge. And that is tactically exactly the right thing to do in this water.
Back once more to the head of the river race, and you can see the massive crews as they're coming down the Putney Reach. So the coxswain has to deal with this congestion, keep in mind the optimum course all the time, trying to get the best advantage for his crew. But it is not simply a matter of sitting in the middle of the river and taking the best course available, which has been described to you. There are many, many problems that the coxswain has to deal with by being quick-witted, alert, planning ahead, and above all, knowing the tideway. There is no substitute for practicing on the course and knowing the water in all its conditions.